Mr. Speaker, Mr. President Pro Tem, members of the General Assembly, cabinet members, members of the court, and especially my fellow Virginians. I come to you tonight in a time of significant national economic distress to talk about how our Commonwealth and our people are faring. Like other states, Virginia is feeling the effects of the national economic recession, which looks like it will be the longest recession since World War II. Citizens are cutting back, they're putting off purchases, and they're stretching their dollars to get through a tight time. At the same time, businesses are struggling. Many are closing or reducing employment. And government agencies, churches, and nonprofit organizations are seeing an increase in demand for services even as the economy has reduced the tax revenues and the donations that they need to provide those services. I've seen these challenges firsthand, and I know you have as well. 4 times each year, I take my entire cabinet on the road to a region of the state where we talk to citizens and learn. We call these visits Cabinet Community Days. In early December, we visited a Virginia Employment Commission office in Petersburg. The national economic news had just struck home in a big way a few days before when a major employer had announced hundreds of layoffs in that community. People I talked to were worried about finding another job, worried about how they'd provide for Christmas for their children, worried about how they'd pay their bills. But they weren't despairing. They were resolved. They were hopeful. And despite whatever worries they had that day, they were helping each other at the VEC office. You know, in 3 years as governor, I've come to see that as a very typical Virginia response. I've seen this kind of hope through adversity time and time again in the Commonwealth in the aftermath of tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods. I saw it after the tragedy at Virginia Tech, and I'm seeing it again in these tough economic times. Whenever someone has a need, Virginians are ready to pitch in and to help. And they want to see the same sense of resolve in us, their elected leadership. Now more than ever before, it's time for all hands to be applied to the task of righting the national economy. President-elect Obama and the Congress are discussing a federal stimulus package to do just that. And I'm pleased that they've sought the detailed input of the nation's governors. And as all discussed tonight, we're moving forward on capital projects and business incentives designed to help create jobs. But while government action is necessary, it will be the entrepreneurial spirit of our people that will turn this economy around. Those who dare to take risks will create the new companies and the new jobs. And Virginia workers, with that great dedication to hard work, will continue to make those companies the best in the world. Our job is to allow that creativity, that risk-taking, and that dedication to flourish. Our job is to create the environment in which our citizens can be successful. And you know, we've done this in Virginia to a remarkable degree. We've been ranked the best managed state in America, the best place for business in the United States, the best place to raise a child, and we're recognized as the best at fiscal management. We pace significantly ahead of national trends in most areas, including our economic strength. Well, now is the time to draw on that strength, to draw on the best of us, to get through this tough time, and especially to try to pave the way for a brighter tomorrow. I know we can do it. I presented you a budget that tightens the belt of government just as citizens and businesses are tightening their own belts and cutting their own expenses. But I've also built innovations and new strategies into the budget. I've made policy proposals that ensure we can continue to attract jobs, succeed in educating our children in tomorrow's workforce, and create new opportunities for a better environment and a cleaner energy future. We can continue to rise to the tough challenges of the day, and we can master them if we act with the resolve that has been summoned by the 7.5 million people outside Capitol Square. There's little doubt that the future of the Commonwealth is strong. Virginia government has a long-standing tradition of fiscal responsibility. Colgate Darden, a former governor, said more than half a century ago, if you take an ordinary Virginian and wake him up out of a deep slumber, he'll say 2 words, fiscal sanity. Well, in an atmosphere of tight credit and an uncertain financial future, all three major bond rating agencies just reaffirmed Virginia's AAA bond rating this fall. Standard & Poor's said, "The Commonwealth's strong financial management focus is evident in its early and active response to the national economic decline." In the spring of 2007, when we first recognized the signs of an economic slowdown, I gave agencies a directive to save money, and we have been in a period of continuous budgetary review ever since that time. I've been about as popular with my state agencies as the guy with the green eye shade, the bank examiner, and It's a Wonderful Life since that time. I'm always coming looking for more. But our early and active approach to this downturn has put Virginia in a better position than many states. Over the last year and a half, we found savings in every area of state government: streamlining services, consolidating administrative functions, renegotiating contracts, freezing hiring, merging agencies, and even doing the tough work of laying off state employees. I've reduced my own salary, cut the executive office budget, and left nearly a third of executive at-will positions unfilled. And I've been personally engaged in hundreds of hours of discussion and analysis of every programmatic area of state government. And we've made the tough decisions to keep the budget balanced without any general tax increase and without compromising core services. Instead of across-the-board cuts, I've promoted targeted, performance-based cuts. We've looked closely at each agency, and we've asked hard questions about the priority of every expenditure, and we've sought data about the outcomes. What's the value that's produced if we invest in this or that program? This approach has enabled us to find savings that have had the least impact on essential services. I've also proposed cuts to try to position us better for the future, rather than just finding savings for today, real long-term savings, instead of relying solely on short-term or one-time actions. I've done that because, when the economy improves, and it will improve, and when the revenues return, and they will return, we want to be able to use the new revenues for the most important priorities right at that time, instead of just using those revenues to do the same old things in the same old ways. Now, that's not to say that any of the cuts, including those I'll talk about tonight, are easy, or that they'll have no impact on services. The fact is, the size of the budget shortfall caused by this recession is just too great to provide the same services in the same way as we have in the past. So I've had to make difficult choices, painful choices, in recommending this budget to you. But I believe those choices preserve the services that educate our young, keep our communities safe, protect our most vulnerable citizens, and create economic opportunities for growth. Well, now these proposals will be debated at length over the next couple of weeks, and you'll have hard decisions to make. But I'm confident at the end of the day that the decisions that we'll make together will be those that will best position Virginia for the future. Educating our young people is the most fundamental thing that government does, teaching our children and grandchildren to be responsible citizens and preparing them for the competitive jobs of tomorrow. That's why K-12 education was the one area that we have not reduced at all in the first 3 rounds of budget reductions. In fact, as we were cutting state programs in most other areas in the biennial budget that we passed in March, we increased funding for public education, the state funding, by approximately $1 billion for the biennium. However, education is the single largest expenditure in the state budget, and the revenue reductions necessary for 2010 are big enough that we won't be able to continue to leave education untouched. So, as with other parts of the budget, I carefully considered our priorities in education, worked with a talented team to talk about strategies, and thought long and hard about the way to make cuts in a way that would protect the most important functions of our schools. And what I decided was this: nothing in schools is more important to students as their teachers and principals. So I've made a proposal that protects our core priority, the classroom. My proposal is to reduce funding for administrative and support positions in schools and central offices by applying a funding cap for these positions. As you know, for years, we've applied a cap to determine the number of teachers and principals we fund, and I think we should do the same for support staff. Now, as a proud parent of 3 public school children, I know that administrative positions are critically important. But with no cap, they've grown much more rapidly than spending on teachers. And So while it's never easy to make cuts to schools, my proposal focuses state funds to protect the students' experience in the classroom. In higher education, I've also had to propose some difficult cuts, but I've tried to be mindful of the effect of higher tuition costs on Virginia families. We continue to have some of the finest colleges and universities, public and private, in the nation, but it will mean little to Virginia students if they can't afford to attend them. I proposed a smaller cut to higher education in the 2009 academic year than to other state agencies, and I asked those colleges and universities not to make any mid-year increases in tuition. Now, in 2010, the cuts are deeper. My budget does propose a lesser cut for the community college system because that's the most affordable point of entry into Virginia's higher ed system. And I propose $26 million in additional support for need-based financial aid so that middle and lower income students will not find the doors of educational opportunity shut to them. Next to education, we spend more on health care than anything else in the state budget, even though Virginia's Medicaid program is very lean compared to other states. In crafting this budget, I was acutely aware that precisely at the time the state is trying to balance our budget, more Virginians are in need of the safety net services that Medicaid and other agencies provide. My proposal makes cuts without taking Medicaid coverage away from anyone who is currently covered. But the decisions to get there were not easy. I proposed capping enrollment to certain programs, freezing or reducing provider reimbursement rates, and delaying the expansion of certain important services in order to cut over $400 million out of our Medicaid program. Now, I've pledged previously to you that I would not meet our budget shortfall through a general tax increase on Virginia's families. The budget that I proposed is true to that pledge. And we maintain tax cuts that we've already put in place: elimination of the estate tax, sales tax holidays for school supplies and energy-efficient appliances, and especially the elimination of all income taxes for nearly 140,000 working Virginians, which became effective January 1 of last year. However, I do propose one targeted tax increase. To avoid even deeper cuts that would mean denying health care services to some of our poor, elderly, and disabled, I propose a 30-cent per pack increase in Virginia's cigarette excise tax. This will bring Virginia's tobacco tax up to about half the national average. Virginia's current cigarette excise tax covers less than half of the $400 million in Medicaid costs that smoking creates, and there are other costs in the budget associated with smoking as well. I believe that the taxes on smoking should more closely match the budget costs that Virginia taxpayers incur because of smoking. Under my proposal, fewer of Virginians' tax dollars will be diverted to cover the costs of smoking. My budget proposal preserves care for the mentally ill, something that I know is important to everyone in this chamber. In the wake of the Virginia Tech tragedy, we made significant investments last session in community-based mental health care. This budget protects those investments that we made together, and the budget continues to push our transformation from a state that over-relies on institutional care of the mentally disabled to a more effective and especially more humane strategy of expanding services that people can receive right in their own communities. My proposed budget protects the advances that we made in this biennial budget in the funding of our health care safety net. You know, last year we worked together to expand the funding for free clinics and community health centers. There are no cuts to those items in this budget, and we continue our expansion of prenatal care to low-income mothers so that we can fight Virginia's unacceptably high infant mortality rate. In the area of safety net expenditures, my budget also includes funding for foreclosure prevention counseling to help families stay in their homes. The new foreclosure reforms that you approved last session are now protecting homeowners from mortgage rescue fraud and providing additional protections for those who have the misfortune to have subprime loans. And the budget also includes a $1 million grant to the Virginia Federation of Food Banks. There are few needs as critical as food for the hungry, and as the economy has worsened, I know you're seeing this in your communities, food banks across the Commonwealth have seen their donations decline and their shelves depleted, even as more Virginians have a need for the vital assistance that they provide. In past budget reductions, we've carefully limited any cuts to public safety agencies because public safety is a core responsibility of government. And we've asked in this area, particularly again and again, what are the most important functions that our public safety agencies provide, and how can we support those core functions without, without spending more, and if possible, while finding budgetary savings? The Department of Corrections is, as you know, one of Virginia's largest agencies. Last fall, we restructured prison facilities, closing older and smaller facilities to become more efficient. However, the rate of growth in the state's budget for incarceration has dramatically outpaced other spending items over the past decade. While we can't make changes that would compromise safety, we've got a responsibility to our citizens and taxpayers to examine the costs and benefits of such dramatic and, I view, unsustainable budgetary growth. Current law allows the Director of the Department of Corrections, Gene Johnson, to release inmates up to 30 days before the end of their term. I have proposed a change to that law so that the Director would have the discretion, not a mandate, the discretion to release inmates convicted of nonviolent crimes up to 90 days early if warranted by good behavior. This small change will result in significant budget savings without compromising public safety. It's been endorsed by Virginia sheriffs and by police chiefs because it will help us deal with another problem, the nearly annual controversy with sheriffs over jail overcrowding problems. I've also proposed legislation to slow the growth of the prison population by reducing the number of technical violators who are sent back to prison every year, not for committing new crimes, but for violating technical conditions of their parole. This is the kind of smart sentencing approach that will save taxpayer dollars without compromising public safety. Virginia's transportation infrastructure faced significant challenges even before the downturn in the economy, and as family incomes have suffered, and automobile sales tax revenues and gas tax revenues have declined, these problems have deepened. Our transportation agencies are reducing administrative overhead to preserve scarcer dollars for maintenance and construction and public transit solutions. To balance its budget, VDOT will reduce central office staff and streamline operations around the state. Over the next 2 years, this will be a significant effort. VDOT will reduce agency employment by about 1,000 people through retirements, attrition, and other restructuring. The Commonwealth Transportation Board has rewritten the 6-year plan to reflect the new reduced financial projections, and the results are startling. Without a long-term commitment from the legislature to support transportation funding, and with the slump in existing revenue sources, dozens of road and bridge projects all across the Commonwealth have been taken out of the 6-year plan. But the budget isn't just about cuts. It also involves investments, especially investments to stimulate the growth that we need to put more Virginians to work. Even in a tough time, Virginia continues to outpace other states in attracting new opportunities. You know, just in the last quarter of 2008, at the same time as economic turmoil was on front pages all over this country, Virginia continued to receive some very positive economic news. Areva and Northrop Grumman announced a partnership to build components for nuclear reactors right on the footprint of the Newport News shipyard, promising great new jobs in a new industry that will be a key to America's energy future. Right in the last week of the year, Orbital, the Virginia-based space company, was awarded a $1.9 billion contract by NASA to launch rockets and satellites into space from Wallops Island, making Virginia now one of the few centers of the nation's new and innovative space industry. An item that will be in the budget before you deals with Continental, the German auto parts manufacturer that had U.S. facilities in South Carolina and Virginia. They decided again right at year-end to consolidate all their operations in Virginia because of our excellent workforce and education system. And at year-end, a project that you know about, the Rolls-Royce project, which will build the next generation of civil aviation engines in Prince George County, was singled out by a business publication as the single best economic development deal in the United States in 2008. So we continue to match up well against our competition around the country and around the globe, but we have to do more. The first thing we should do is make sure that the Governor's Opportunity Fund has sufficient resources to attract these jobs. You know, that orbital announcement I just discussed, that came just months after we won a competition with Florida, a competition to be the primary location for Orbital's launch activity. We wouldn't have won that deal, that competition over Florida, had it not been for an investment from the GOF. And so for that reason, I've suggested an additional $5 million investment to the fund so that we can continue to find great and innovative opportunities. To create new design and construction jobs, my administration is aggressively moving forward to implement capital projects that you have already authorized. The Department of General Services and the Department of Planning and Budget have identified multiple projects that can be, in which the planning can be completed and construction begun within the next few months. Accordingly, I am setting a goal that a minimum of 30 state capital projects worth at least $250 million in construction will be put to bid prior to the end of this fiscal year. This target equates to an average of 6 projects a month between February 1 and the end of June. The projects will put people to work, will build a higher platform for long-term economic success, and they'll take advantage of a climate where, frankly, construction costs now are pretty favorable to us. In addition, my team and I are working closely with the incoming federal administration to help develop their economic stimulus package. I've spoken personally with the President-elect about the importance of investing in new infrastructure to put Americans to work. And last week I was with him when he came to Virginia, to George Mason University, to lay out the plan, a plan for safety net enhancement, infrastructure investments, and middle-class tax cuts to get the economy moving again. Now, we should see action. Some of you were there. Yep, some of you were there. We should see action on this stimulus proposal soon after inauguration. Since the budget that I introduced in December did not factor in any federal stimulus, the package should help ease some of the budgetary challenges in Virginia at the same time as it spurs the economy forward. Part of climbing out of a challenged economy is focusing our efforts on the industries of the future. And one area where we should spend some very significant attention in our economic efforts is the creation of green jobs. The development and the deployment of new energy sources presents dramatic new opportunities for the Commonwealth. The Virginia Economic Development Partnership, at my direction, has just completed an aggressive marketing plan to promote Virginia's business case for new investments in this area. And I have created an interagency task force for energy project recruitment that will work with VEDP to build Virginia's compelling case for renewable energy-related businesses. The task force will include state agencies, university research centers, private partners, and federal laboratories located in Virginia. We have a tremendous natural advantage in this area through the research that's already being done in the Commonwealth at our colleges and universities. Every institution in Virginia is working on innovative new energy projects. Just a few examples: transportation fuel cells at Virginia Tech, energy-efficient buildings at UVA, algae-based biodiesel, not algae Howell, algae-based biodiesel at Old Dominion University, and new energy crops at Virginia State University. My administration is pursuing changes that would make it easier to take these new energy technology discoveries made on Virginia campuses and turn them into new companies and new jobs in the state. In collaboration with these technology-based economic development organizations, our universities will develop a single internet portal for investors to easily understand first the type of research that's being done, but more importantly, how they can be part of bringing these new technologies to market. We're also leveraging state research investment dollars to encourage the most commercially promising new discoveries and help turn them into jobs. And I'm proposing a number of measures that will help these companies grow and thrive and to make Virginia an attractive place to relocate existing green job companies. First, we should expand the existing incentive for solar manufacturers that we currently have to include other manufacturers that make alternative energy equipment and products in other areas, wind, for example, or biodiesel. Second, we need to amend the current Biofuels Incentive Grant, which is a good program, but we should give a preference for those biofuels that do not compete with our food supply. We can also make it easier for small and startup companies and farms to earn this grant. And I also propose to implement a requirement in Virginia that biodiesel should comprise 2% of the diesel fuel sold in the Commonwealth. This will provide a market certainty for Virginia biodiesel producers so that they can invest in new production capacity. Other states have implemented these productions, and they've attracted significant biofuel investments. Virginia shouldn't be left behind. Third, we should expand the market for these new energy companies through targeted tax reductions that make small residential alternative energy installations more affordable. For this reason, I propose to give an income tax credit on solar photovoltaic, solar thermal, and wind power electric generators installed in either homes or Virginia businesses. This proposed credit would be worth up to $8,000 on an individual household system, depending upon the size of the system, and I proposed a year-round sales tax exemption for residential renewable energy systems. Finally, to ensure that the biggest energy purchasers aggressively pursue renewable energy, I propose raising Virginia's renewable portfolio standard, which is the amount of Virginia Power Company's electricity that must be generated from alternative energy sources, from 12% to 15% by the year 2025. But renewable sources are not the only path to energy-related jobs. Energy conservation must be a key part of any long-term energy plan for a household, for a business, or for government. That's why a year ago, I formed a team of experts from many sectors: business leaders, economists, legislators, power company executives, environmentalists, scientists, local government officials, and others, to examine the potential effects of climate change on our Commonwealth, and especially to propose strategies to address those effects. I proposed legislation this year to begin to implement the Climate Change Commission's top recommendation, the reduction of electricity consumption by 19% of current levels by 2025, with appropriate adjustments for population growth. Virginia's utility companies will be tasked with taking the steps necessary to promote energy conservation, and they'll be given the tools to do it. You know, under current law, we guarantee a rate of return for a utility building a new coal plant, but not for utility investments that promote conservation. And that just makes no sense. Our long-term planning should recognize that conservation is just as important an energy source as new construction. And we should treat conservation investments at least as favorably as new generation investments, and my bill will do just that. 2 years ago, I issued an executive order requiring that all new state buildings would be constructed to high energy efficiency standards. Later, the General Assembly included similar language in the budget bill. And that was a smart step to ensure that the Commonwealth makes good energy decisions, investing wisely today so that we can save energy costs down the road and do the right thing for the environment. It'll save us money in the long run and protect the environment as we do it. This year, I'm going to ask you to ratify that approach again by requiring in the Code of Virginia that all state and local government buildings must meet either LEED or Green Globe standards for energy efficiency. This focus on conservation will lead to more jobs. You know, employers, carpenters, electricians, installers, and other contracting professionals who work to retrofit old buildings is one way to put people quickly back to work. And by expecting new construction to meet these enhanced environmental standards, we can provide additional opportunities for advanced construction jobs. A University of California study that recently concluded that the conservation measures taken in that state had put millions of dollars back into the pockets of residents, allowing them to make private sector spending decisions with more of their own money, decisions that really help make the economy work. Virginia can do the same for economic and for environmental reasons. So all in all, the focus on creating these green jobs, finding alternative energy opportunities and better conservation technology will help our economy by creating jobs and enabling people to save money. I was surprised to learn that a generation ago, Virginia had a growing solar industry, one of the best in the United States. But the disappearance of state and federal tax incentives caused the industry to shrink and research to decline in Virginia and all across this country. Today, of the 10 largest solar manufacturers in the world, none are American. We need to bring these investments back to our shores and back to our Commonwealth, and with these measures we will. Of course, there is another reason to focus our attention on better energy and environmental practices. Virginia has been blessed with incredible natural resources. From the Chesapeake Bay to the beautiful mountains of southwest Virginia, the Commonwealth has always been a place of unmatched beauty and natural inspiration. In 1612, Captain John Smith wrote, "Heaven and earth never agreed to frame a better place for man's habitation." And you know, that's been our inheritance and our obligation ever since. We need to make sure that our children and our grandchildren enjoy that same beauty. For these reasons, I have launched the Renew Virginia initiative this year. Renew Virginia will encompass the actions I've just described tonight on renewable energy, energy conservation, and green jobs, but it will also extend to other efforts to protect Virginia's environment during 2009. We'll act by budget and legislation, but also by regulation, executive orders, creative partnerships with private sector innovators, and multi-state collaborations. Now that we together have put $1.1 billion into sewage treatment upgrades to protect the Chesapeake Bay and our rivers, we need to turn our focus to partnering with farmers to keep agricultural runoff from polluting our streams. My budget puts $20 million toward that goal to continue the investment that you made as you started on that priority last year. Last month, some of you may have seen this, Virginia entered into a model agreement with the Department of Defense at the Pentagon to encourage and recognize environmental stewardship by military installations in the Commonwealth. We'll give out an annual DoD Silver Eagle Award to the military bases in this state that do the best job of environmental stewardship. This program doesn't exist anywhere else in the United States, and the Pentagon embraced it and said they want to do it in Virginia and they want to make it a model for the rest of the nation. These are the kinds of creative partnerships we can do. And I'm pleased to announce that we are on pace to meet a goal that I announced 2 months after I became governor, to permanently protect more than 400,000 acres of open space in Virginia during my term of office. During this legislative session and then throughout 2009, we'll continue to announce efforts like these to renew Virginia, both environmentally and economically. And we'll also announce ways that everyone can help. Because as with the economy, government action is necessary to protect the environment, but government can't do the job by itself. It's up to each of us to examine our own family's energy consumption and our own business practices and find ways to conserve, whether it's changing old light bulbs for the new fluorescent ones, or adding insulation to reduce heating costs, or turning off computers when we leave the office, or using public transit. We can, all of us, every one of us, do the little things that added up together can make a tremendous difference. There's no question that energy is the next great challenge of our generation. If we are to protect our environment, reduce climate change, and find lasting sources of sustainable energy right on our shore so we can reduce our dependence on other countries, including many that we don't get along with, it will take all of our collective efforts. And I know that Virginians have the dedication and especially the ingenuity to be leaders in this area, just as we are in so many others. Well, there will be other major issues this year because each of you bring very important priorities from your home communities to place before your colleagues. We should deal with all of those issues, and we should deal with them in a civil and constructive way, respecting each other's perspectives. I don't have to tell you that we are serving in one of the most difficult times in our nation's recent history. But we must be mindful that our pressures are no greater than those that our citizens are facing every day. And others who have served here long before us face similar challenging circumstances. It's my hope that the size of this challenge and our connection to so many who have faced similar challenges will inspire our best efforts to cooperate in finding the best solutions. We have a responsibility to make decisions, however difficult, to keep the Commonwealth on a firm financial footing and to prepare us for future economic success. We have an opportunity to be leaders in the nation and in the world in the development of renewable energy. We have an obligation to protect the natural legacy that our ancestors have left to us. And especially, we've got the privilege to represent our citizens, to be here and to be able to engage their best ideas, encourage their talents, and unleash their creativity. I can say this with confidence. We will not just weather this challenge, but we'll seize the opportunity to prepare for the future, and we'll emerge even stronger than before. Good luck over the next 6 weeks. May God bless each of you and our collective efforts, and may God bless this Commonwealth. Thank you very much, and good night.